I'm Andrew Swain, and welcome to the Rugby Hive. Played against Jacksonville, and so it was a Wednesday night. There wasn't too many people around, and I scored a try. And the rule was if you scored the try, you had to convert your own try. And I was a terrible kicker, like one of the worst. I could not kick off the tee, still cannot to this day. I scored the try, walking back, and my dad is sitting on the hill just behind me, and I can hear him talking to the person next to him, and he says, "Oh, watch this. This is going to be funny. He cannot kick to save his life." And so I'm walking back with the ball under my arm, and I didn't want that. I was like, I just waved the tee away. I was like, nah, I'm not even going to try. Kick it off the tee. Drop kicked it from about 10 in from the sideline, just past the 22. Flushed it down the middle over the black dot, and I've walked back to my dad. I've turned around to my dad and gone, "See you later, son." Yes. Giving him one of these ones in the face, and he was laughing his head off. It was a very
so dangerous. Freddy Krueger has nightmares about him.
Hello and welcome to the Rugby Hive. I'm Dallen Stanford, and despite my South African accent, I was fortunate enough to play rugby for the United States on the Sevens World Series.
And I'm MacDowell, a former Canadian Sevens international. Back in my playing days, I went head-to-head against Dallen and the USA.
For several years, Robin has coached international sevens for various countries, including Canada and Mexico. He's massively passionate about growing the game across the Americas through his MacDowell rugby programs at all levels. I'm currently a commentator for World Rugby, most recently broadcasting the Rugby World Cup in Japan, as well as the amazing Sevens World Series.
More than a decade later, we are teaming up to bring you insights from legendary players and coaches from around the world.
All legends have a story. The Rugby Hive podcast is here to share it.
Welcome to the Hive.
Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 29 of the Rugby Hive podcast, brought to you by Wintergreen, who produce a complete range of products containing wintergreen oil, other therapeutic natural actives to aid athletes before, during, and after training. I've been using their products all year. Helps me get around park cars like back in the day. Visit the legends at wintergreensport.com, also a proud partner of USA Rugby and Major League Rugby. So great to have them on board. Well, ladies and gentlemen, can you believe December is almost done? 2021 is almost shutting the gates. A ton has happened this year. More recently, some international 10s for Robin and the Hsbc Sevens World Series for me in Dubai. And Robs, we almost got to meet up in the desert, but it wasn't to be.
So close. Obviously, the global pandemic caught up with us. But after 2 months of being on the road, I welcomed a trip home to recover and get back coaching with the kids here on the island.
Oh, well, we almost had you, Ben Gollings, and myself all in the same place. Gaz Barino was going absolutely mental trying to make sure that she could get in the reunion, but we'll make sure we do it again soon. Who knows? Vancouver Sevens is around the corner as well, which is always a lot easier. Let's talk a bit more about our Rugby Hive partners first. World Rugby Shop, they've been amazing for us. 45 products that they have at the merch store. Go to worldrugbyshop.com, type in Rugby Hive. I must say, my Mrs. Verdi has been getting plenty of compliments wherever she wears the rugby gear. I get a couple, but not of course, as many as she does. Next up, Gilbert Rugby Canada. And Robin, we even featured in their holiday advertising, weren't we?
Yeah, with Christmas around the corner, our Hive ball is picking up some steam, and you can pick it up at gilbertrugby.com as well as on the World Rugby Shop. Our ball's available across North America.
Now, what about biltong? I've been very jealous because my biltong got sent to me from Canada. It got incinerated at the border, so I still haven't tried it yet.
Yeah, I've been spoiled this fall, that's for sure. It was the number one thing I packed when I went fishing on the ocean this summer as well. And our freezer's full, and I bumped into Paul Bennett, the owner and producer of Biltong Canada. His son, very talented son, Matt Bennett, that I think we spoke about in the past, but he's got South African blood like you. And he helped James Bay win U17 Sorry Island final yesterday. He was carving it up, and they gave me a nice little Rugby Hive Biltong Canada package, and just to rub it in on your side.
Oh man, okay. I can't wait to try it when I finally get over the border again. I also want to thank Enduro Sports. We've been using their products for about 2 months now. Love the stuff. A daily serving of Enduro Sport pre-action equips your body for spontaneous adventure, designed to support your overall health and provide you with the boost you need to get through the day with energy to spare. You can get 40% off Enduro Sport, link in the podcast notes and on socials as well, their website being endurosportofficial.com. All right, cracking on. What's happening in the world? Let's start with you, Rob, the Canadian all-round nice guy. What have you been up to the last couple of months since we last spoke?
I think we last spoke. I don't know if before I'd gone to Trinidad and Tobago. It's been a country that I've been definitely motivated to work with since I started coaching against them almost a decade ago. Although when I was with Mexico, we were able to get on top of them. They boast so much talent. And so Life University men's head coach, Colton Carriaga, I took him down there with me and we had the best time. We were spoiled by the TTRU president, Maria Thomas. We had coaching courses, developing helping them with their restart plan across the islands. But honestly, the people were so welcoming. The food was amazing. It felt like carnival every day. And then the Saturday before we went home on the Sunday, they took us to Tobago. And Trinidad is amazing. Tobago is like another level. I'm talking paradise. The beaches were amazing, the hospitality, the barbecue, but the talent, which is really why I went there. I've never seen anywhere with so much talent. For me, it's at the Trinidad and Tobago. If those that don't know where it is, it's the very southern tip of the Caribbean, just off South America. So it's a good 2-day haul for me to get there. But boy, was it worth it, Dallen. And they were all about 3 times the size of me, and of course, 100 times faster. So far as a coach, like I don't think I've ever worked with that many talented athletes in such a small area, and really excited to continue our partnership with Trinidad and Tobago, Maria Thomas, and all those wonderful coaches and faces, South Atlantic, I guess.
Yeah, well, we need to get another tournament there because the RAN event, Rugby Americas North, of course, they do a bunch of 7s and they even had 10s on the go as well. So great. Wherever they go around the world, my hand is up, my friend, ready to broadcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, we're talking about getting a couple tournaments this year in Tobago. I mean, what a destination. And then, of course, my missus and I finally got our honeymoon off in lovely Lagos, Portugal, in the Algarve. She had us lined up downtown and we went to the beaches every day. It was a bit crisp. The air was cold, but it was a heck of a nicer than where you and I are living right now. And we had a wonderful time there. And then, of course, like a good rugby wife, we blended right into the launch of the Rugby 10s Championship in Lisbon. And that was an amazing experience. And again, as a coach, for me, I love working with people from around the world, but I was fortunate enough to coach 16 talented women from 11 different countries. And there was 7 different languages, Dallen. It was absolutely amazing. It was a lot of work that week. But I had Canadian legend Andrea Burke, who I know you've been on the hot mic with before. So having her, she was my first pick, and obviously just brought in her leadership, which made my job easier. And she's just such a class woman. And she said after from when she arrived to when she left, thanks to our friends at Athlete Health First, like she actually felt better at 38 years old and had been retired for 2 years than she had on Monday. So she played brilliantly as well. So hopefully we get a few more years out of her.
And what was the name of the team that you coached again?
The Cape Town Wild Dogs. So you got your hometown hero here. I've never been to Cape Town yet, but hopefully I'll be there at the World Cup this fall with you.
That'll be so great, pal. It is so interesting. Are you eating biltong on that side? You are coaching a Cape Town-based rugby team, and yeah, we still haven't taken you there. So we've got to get that organized. Also, I want to say, very cheeky of you, that your honeymoon with Sam was also blended into a rugby trip. That was very clever and very cunning.
Well, we were meant to go to Hawaii, but then this tens opportunity came up, and thanks to the Rhinos group out of San Clemente, California, for launching this amazing league and getting these global stars from around the world involved. But yeah, it's not her first rodeo, just like B, so she was along for the ride.
Well, that's brilliant. Massive congratulations from me personally and V as well. And of course, to everybody listening. Great to hear that side, Robs. And then things on my side, we weren't as busy in November, but the great thing was there's this new Kiwi company called Spalk, and they're doing remote broadcasts. So World Rugby asked me to do 4 different internationals. Most of the matches actually played in Spain. So it was really cool. So I got a chance to commentate here just from my old lounge. Got a chance to do Fiji against Spain, French Barbarians against Tonga, Portugal, Japan, and the Flying Fijians against Georgia. So lots of different names, pronunciation, lots of work, but great fun to be able to stay home and call those games. And of course,
can you give us a couple of those names?
Gorgatsi. I mean, the Georgian names actually, they look complicated because some of them were written in Russian on the team sheet. But then if you look at the English names, they either end in Ashvili or Gorgadze, something like that, you know. So
I got a fun fact for you. So when I played in Northern France 20 years ago, just to date myself, we had 4 Georgians in our team, and they were like our best players. Of course, they were on their national team. And I came back after Christmas, and I was living with this family in Lille in Northern France. And I had this beautiful bedroom. They had a 4-story, like 100-year-old, antique, amazing home. Had my own setup, and I come home from Christmas in Canada, and there's this Georgian boy. He's like in my bed. And so I I have a cot. He was supposed to take the cot, but like a good Canadian, I'm like, no, you keep the bed. So anyway, we were complete strangers from different parts of the world. And we basically shared this bedroom for 6 months. And I was pretty hardcore with my training, being a small little worker bee. But we'd go to the gym on Saturdays. We typically play on Sundays. We go to the gym on Saturdays. We take the train together. We work out for 2-3 hours. We had nothing better to do. We're like 20. And then we come back and we watch French rugby, Stade Francais, and all those guys all day. And then he would hammer out push-ups all day. Now, we were in a professional setup, so we would train like 5-6 days a week. And we just finished a 3-hour workout, and this guy would still be hammering push-ups. And I'm like, this guy is so weird. Like, what is he doing? Like, why be a hero? But it was the biggest lesson I ever learned, because 2 years later, I was at my buddy's house at like 4 a.m. watching the World Cup, and it was Georgia versus South Africa. And who was starting at scrum half? But my roommate, my bedmate, for that matter. And I was like, there was nothing normal about that guy. And I decided from that point on that I would never do anything normal, and I would never went above and beyond. So every time I was watching a show or doing anything, I just hammer out push-ups. So people always ask, like, why do your athletes, why do you always do so many push-ups? I'm like, it's because of that guy. And it was always about that extra. So for me, that guy set me on a course on another level. And he had a goal, he had a dream, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. And his dream came true. So that's my little Georgian fun fact.
That's a great Georgian fun fact as well. No, they honestly, such a great nation. They really put everything into their rugby, which is really good to see them, building towards the big stage. The other cool fact about the Georgian players, also looking at their bios, there were currently 57 players playing in France professionally. 56 of them were in the front row.
Big hard boys.
Exactly. And then I want to touch on the Hsbc Sevens World Series. Of course, we had back-to-back weekends in Dubai to kick off the 2022 season. We didn't go to Cape Town because of COVID and everything else like that. So there are 2 tournaments in the desert. It was unbelievable. The second weekend, fans were allowed to come in, 80,000 over the 2 days. It was such an honor working with the World Rugby broadcast crew on this one. We had a couple of Englishmen on the call, Rupert Cox, Jack Zorab, Johnny Hammond, and then, of course, former England Sevens captain Rob Vickerman, plus Welsh legend Philippa Tatiet. 2 World Rugby Hall of Famers, American Phaedra Knight, and our very own Canadian Gareth Rees, who, of course, has been on the podcast here before, which was great. So that crew was fantastic. Tom Burwell at the Dubai Sevens organization has done absolutely brilliantly. We had an Emirates Boeing fly over the stadium as well to celebrate the return to Sevens. Plus, we had a bunch of great guests on stage as well. We had James Haskell DJing. We had the band Disclosure. We even had Ben Gollings in the house. He was so elusive, the World Series top point scorer. I couldn't even catch him at that event. We hope to get him pretty soon, pal. Let's switch across to what's coming up on the calendar for you over the rest of December and coming up January as well.
Sorry, I just want to go back to my favorite player right now, Marcus Moneta from the Pumas.
Yes,
I called him in the Olympics. Like, that guy is lights out. What did you think of him last weekend?
Oh, he's so fun. So fun. He came off the bench. You knew every time he was going to come on the field, he was going to do something special. And one moment stands out at the restart, knocked back by the opposition. He comes through. He kicks it ahead twice skillfully, dives on it to score. I mean, he is a slippery eel of note.
Box office. We got to get him on the show. We'll get a hold of Santi and line it up.
We shall. I saw Santi, by the way, another one of our great guests as well. It was really cool to be back in the mix and catch up with people in person. He's just obviously such a lovely character and so good. His side, finishing with another bronze medal was brilliant.
So coming up next, I've got some opportunities coaching with some national teams coming up. We'll share in the new year, but really excited. We've just announced that our MacDowell Rugby Academy, we're actually going to take a girls team and a boys U18 side to LA Sevens. So we'll see you at the LA Sevens. We'll be at the Vancouver Sevens, obviously just supporting the teams, but just thrilled to put our teams forward. Some of our athletes have put their name up that have never had trials. So Erica Kissinger from Texas, actually we got her trial like in between Christmas and New Year. So for me, she's the next Alev Kelter. Big words, but having the opportunity to work with Alev a couple months ago and having to known Erica for 2-3 years and seeing that girl come through. She's got another year with us yet, but she'll be on display in LA. But most importantly, the U18 camp, and then we've had a number of boys have a look with the U18 Canada camp. So our kids are making waves, and then. Obviously, just getting excited for the Premier Sevens in 2022. I'm sure we'll see you there too, as well as hopefully some Rugby 10s Championship competitions all over the world. But the Loonies tattoo is on the cards here now that I got some downtime, so I haven't forgot about it. And Owen Scannell has made sure that we document every drop of ink that goes into my flash.
Okay, hold on, because your mom was not a fan. I don't think Sam was in for it. So you're leaning now. You're going to do it. 80% there. What do you reckon?
No, I'm 100% there.
100% in.
I'm a man of my word, man. And plus, you told the whole world, so I can't let a relationship stew like that. I have to deliver. So
that is unbelievable news. Okay, we may have to go live with it, as you said, like an Insta live covering the Hive.
We'll do it in Vancouver, LA while you're there. You can go live with it.
Okay, good. Okay, so before Vancouver and LA, cool news is we've got the Spain Sevens coming up. So we've got 2 events happening there. Can't wait to announce that for the Hsbc World Rugby 7 Series, top 3 and 4. Malaga will take place January 21 to 23 in Sevilla, January 28 to the 30th. So that's really cool coming up. And then before that, the Freetail Sevens in Austin, Texas. I'll be heading over there the last week of December with the missus. It's a New Year event taking place December 30th and 31st. Freetail Sevens, the bats is their logo. It's going to be fantastic as always, which will be brilliant, pal. And then let's touch on our guest coming up here, Andrew Swain, episode 29, the Australian legend, aka Swaino, the water buffalo. Got a chance to meet Swaino for the first time at the World Rugby Under-20 Championship in 2019, Rosario, Argentina. He's a brilliant man. He's humble. He's kind. He's very funny. He's extremely colorful as well. And then one thing I loved about this episode too was that this was recorded last year. So in 2020, he was talking about, some of his idols and in the broadcasting world, and Greg Clark, the Australian voice, of course, iconic around the world. But since then, Swaino has taken over that lead commentating role, and he's brought to the colorful voice to many of the Wallabies test matches, took in on the All Blacks, the Springboks in France. So he's been involved in iconic moments this year. So I think it's perfect timing to drop this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. He said one of his goals was to actually commentate a Wallabies game. He's done some Wallaroos games. So that for me, I love that a guy that's accomplished so much in his career has goals, and he's achieving them now. It's just fun. And obviously he's just got that Australian flavor. And it was our first carpool karaoke podcast as well. He recorded the whole episode in his car because it's a house full of kids running around that are just as loud and fun as him.
I know that was probably the best thing. We need to capture some screenshots because folks listening to the podcast won't see it. We'll put it up on our socials as well, which is great.
So what's happening here? He's in quarantine in his car right now.
So we want to thank everybody for tuning in, listening to the Rugby Hive. We really appreciate all the support from around the globe. And the Rugby Hive is brought to you by Wintergreen. So check out wintergreensport.com. Get some of the amazing products where you can be just as active, or you can recover from injuring yourself sleeping, which is what often we do when we get older as well. Also, you can visit the Rugby Hive store at World Rugby Shop. Check on gilbertrugbycanada.com. They have our new rugby ball, and the endurosportofficial.com. You can also read fantastic rugby articles by Karen Gasbarino, the Gaz, on our website, plus social media content from the English legend Ben Gollings as well will be popping up on our site. So thanks to all the hot steppers at the Rugby Network, home for Rugby North America, and for putting our episodes on the rugbynetwork.com. We wish you all the best for happy holidays. Be safe out there. Enjoy time with the family. And of course, keep sharing our Rugby Hive podcast. We're on Twitter and Facebook at Rugby Hive, and Instagram at MyRugbyHive, the website, rugbyhive.com. And it's time now for Season 2, Episode 29 with Andrew Swain. Well, the guests keep rolling. Swaino, brilliant to have the original buffalo, water buffalo, I should say, on the show. Welcome, my Quackerburger.
Oh, thank you, Mamili. How's it, boy?
Swaino, you're such a colorful character. It is, again, such a pleasure to have you on. And tell us a little bit, though, how things going, man? How are you and the family keeping? Are you multitasking, homeschooling? What's on the crack that side?
Oh, look, thanks for having me on, fellas. Really excited to chat to you. And yeah, look, it's been pretty good down here. Australia is in a pretty privileged position. We're a big island, so we can shut the borders and not let anyone in and get on top of the old COVID side of things. So they've just started reopening everything. It's going to be slow, but yeah, and the family's well. I've got 2 young kids. I was so glad the day that I could send my 4-year-old back to preschool. That was a great day because the poor young fella was just going stir crazy at home. And then we've got a 6-month-old, and she's been pretty good too. So we got in just before the old coronavirus struck with that one. So it's been nice to spend a bit of time with them, but also get them back or get the young fella back to school at least. So yeah, it's been pretty good. Not too bad. We haven't been too affected by everything, so it's been good.
Yeah, you guys have been, you've done a great job there in Australia, and I know our friends in New Zealand as well, which is fantastic. I wish I could say the same here in the USA, but we'll leave that for another chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Swaino, let's go right back to the days when you were growing up. What was that like, and where did you grow up, and what was life like as a youngster?
Yeah, I was born in Perth, Western Australia. So I now live on the East Coast. So that's over on the West Coast. And yeah, grew up there. I was 10 when we moved to Brisbane, and so in Perth. So really, it's probably one of the most isolated cities in the world, capital cities in the world. So you're kind of 3 hours and 15 years behind everything when you're over there. But AFL is a big, Aussie rules football is a big, the big sport over there. The West Coast Eagles and the Freo Dockers are the big teams. And so rugby, up until probably the last 10, 15 years, hasn't really been on the map. So it wasn't there when I was there. And I was introduced to rugby when I moved over to Brisbane and grew up sort of my formative years in Brisbane, which is a great town. If you've ever been there, it's, Queensland, very relaxed, very laid back. Everyone's very friendly up there. Queensland beautiful one day, perfect the next. Is the tagline. And it was a great place to grow up. I just spent a lot of time outdoors. We'd go camping or, go to the beaches on the Sunshine Coast or the Gold Coast. And I played lots of sport. Just that was sort of, I was just addicted to sport as a youngster. So, growing up, and mum and dad always did everything for us. They were, I've got everything to thank them for. Got a brother and a sister as well. Very different people. My dad and I are very much into sport. My mum and my sister and brother are very much into the arts side of things. So we're all very different people, which actually made for really interesting upbringing. So yeah, that's a bit about myself. You kind of got my background in a nutshell.
You talked about being passionate about sports. What sports did you play growing up?
Yeah, well, so actually growing up in Perth, Aussie rules was my first kind of sport that I played, but my dad was just mad about cricket, and so am I. And I am still, it's still my first passion, my first love. Love cricket. And so when we moved to Brisbane, the first place that we moved into was right across the road from a big park, and it had a cricket pitch in the middle. And I would literally wake up in the morning, go out and stand in the middle of the pitch, in the middle of the oval with my cricket bat and a ball. And within, 10 minutes, it'd normally take a few minutes, but within 10 minutes, all the neighbourhood kids would come and converge and we'd have a big game of cricket. And, if it wasn't out on the pitch, wherever else we lived or whatever, it'd be on the street. Cricket was just, I was mad about it. I used to go to sleep with the old, there was this shop, the Greg Chappell Cricket Centre, and it had a catalogue that came out every year with all the new gear, and I would go to sleep with it and circle everything that I wanted and sleep with my cricket bat and gloves, and I was that kid. I was a mad cricketer.
Now listen, were you an all-rounder? Were you a batter? Were you a bowler? What was your skill?
I preferred to bowl, and so I probably started more as a bowler, but as I got older, I sort of developed just this skill of, I was hard to get out. I'd leave a lot. I was very patient out there. I was a good night watchman. I wasn't particularly good at anything, really, let's face it, but otherwise I would have been, a better cricketer. But I just loved it. I just loved spending time out in the middle. I loved to bowl, loved to bat, loved the banter in the field. That's the best thing about cricket, I reckon, was the banter. And yeah, it was just my passion. And my brother, who was polar opposite, really hated cricket, but I'd make him come out into the middle and I'd bowl at him, and he would only ever want to bat. And so I'd be like, now it's my turn to bat, and he'd go, I'm out, see ya, and he'd leave, and then we'd have massive barneys. So but yeah, it's and I still love it to this day. I do a bit of production on it at Fox Sports occasionally as well, and yeah, it's great. I love watching the cricket.
We don't get much cricket in North America, but what we do get is a lot of baseball. I grew up playing baseball, and that was my first love too. And same thing, bat and ball out on the field for days and swinging for the fence. So that's a cool story. Tell us a bit about your rugby after school, and who'd you play for, and some of the memories that spring to mind.
Yeah, so as I said, I sort of wasn't introduced to rugby till I was probably more a teenager. Played a couple of years juniors, but I actually didn't really focus on rugby until I was probably 17, which is a bit later than a lot of people these days. And I went to a public school, so rugby, it wasn't a rugby school that I went to. So I went and played at Brothers Rugby Club. This is the cap here, Brothers. and they are still my, I actually couldn't ever picture myself playing for another club. I was very passionate about playing down there. Went and played Colts there, and then pretty quickly moved into grade and first grade. And I was just I didn't play at a top level for a very long time, but I enjoyed my time there, and I'm still mates with a lot of the guys that I played with. And it was I was coached by some really wonderful people. And Brothers has got a wonderful history of Wallabies. John Eales, who's probably arguably the greatest Wallaby. I wore that number 5 jersey at Brothers that he would have worn, and that was a real honour. In that first grade team, that's probably where my sort of top level rugby ends. But then moved to Sydney for work and played for a club down here, a subbies club, sub-districts club called Colleagues. And because I had a bad knee injury, and so it took a long time to recover from that. And I really enjoyed my time playing subbies rugby. It was just a little bit more relaxed, a bit more about the social side of things. And I never won anything playing first grade rugby, but we won a Judd Cup, which is the 4th grade subbies competition here in Sydney. And I reckon that is my greatest rugby memory. That day was all time. We'd run and won our grand final by about 11 o'clock in the morning, because that was the grade of level of rugby that we were playing. And the rest of the day we spent sitting on the hill watching the other grand finals, drinking beer and punting on the horses. And we'd all had one bet on one horse that won that day. The day is just so vivid for winning a rugby grand final, drinking beer and winning on the horses. That's what it's all about for me. I loved it.
That's absolutely epic. I mean, I also love the build up to that, though. As you said, wearing John Eales' jersey, he played before you. And I mean, that's amazing. We love that story too. The best part about rugby, I think, for a lot of us is the social element and hanging out. And it's great if you are able to play at a higher level. But some people said you played a little bit of fly-off as well. Is that true, or is that just a rumor?
A ball playing lock is probably the area that I probably more excelled in. I played... Story for you. We played against a USA team. We played against Jacksonville once down at Brothers. They came and touring Jacksonville team, and they played against Brothers team on a Wednesday night, and I played. And it was taken semi-seriously, but put it this way, I played on the wing that night. I was 6'5", not particularly athletic, but could change.
Give us your 100-meter time. Just give us an average 100-meter time. Minutes, 2 minutes?
It was pretty close to that, I'd say. But we played against Jacksonville, and so it was a Wednesday night. There wasn't too many people around, and I scored a try. And the rule was if you scored the try, you had to convert your own try. And I was a terrible kicker, like one of the worst. I could not kick off the tee, still cannot to this day. I hope my son one day learns that skill, because it was that's one thing that John Eales could do in that number 5 jersey that I couldn't do. Lucky I was wearing 14 that night. So scored the try, walking back, and my dad is sitting on the hill just behind me, and I can hear him talking to the person next to him, and he says, "Oh, watch this. This is going to be funny. He cannot kick to save his life." And so I'm walking back with the ball under my arm, and I didn't want that. I was like, I just waved the tee away. I was like, nah, I'm not even going to try. Kick it off the tee. Drop kicked it from about 10 in from the sideline, just past the 22, flushed it down the middle over the black dot. And I've walked back to my dad. I've turned around to my dad and gone, "See you later, son." Yes. Giving him one of these ones in the face, and he was laughing his head off. It was a very funny night. But those types of memories, playing rugby against touring teams, and they're the ones that I remember. They're the best.
Oh, that is a brilliant story. I mean, that does remind me of Carlos Spencer, even though he did it against, I think, one of the Aussie teams, scoring in the corner, but purposely running to the far side, putting it down, and then nailing the conversion and giving it to the crowd,
He did. He gave him one of these ones
yes,
too, didn't
correct,
he?
exactly. Swain style, if you will.
Yeah.
Also, listen, after high school, what did you get involved with off the field? What sort of studies or things did you go into?
Yeah, I finished high school in 2001. and I got straight into a journalism degree at University of Queensland, who incidentally are one of Brothers' arch rivals, the university team there. So that was a little bit of irony. Didn't really like them at all, those bookworms, but it was got into a journalism degree, and that's sort of that was very much a turning point for me. I once I had my knee injury as well, I sort of had to make the choice. I was like, am I going to go and really concentrate on my studies, or am I going to get this fixed and try and make a fist of rugby? And I probably chose the piece of paper from university. That was sort of the choice that I had to make. And, you know, you go back and think about things in hindsight, but I wouldn't change anything. It was a great decision. And so doing the journalism degree at University of Queensland, great fun, made a lot of great friends as well, and still played club rugby. And whilst I was doing that degree, I also had a part-time job working at the local radio station up there, Triple M, you know, driving around their promo trucks, handing out icy cold cans of Coke and doing crosses from random parks and that sort of stuff. And that was a real eye-opener for the business of media for me. And I probably got more out of that than I did actually studying, I reckon. That was probably more influential in my career than doing the actual degree. But you still got to do that, I guess. You got to do that, get that piece of paper, go to university and do it.
Yes, exactly. And then how did you transfer those skills from the radio to being, you know, on the TV side of it, commentary for rugby and stuff?
Well, I actually, at that radio station, one of the guys who was on the breakfast show there, a guy named Greg Martin. I don't know if you've met Marto before, Dallen, but he's a rugby commentator, former Wallaby, real character. And he was one of the hosts on the breakfast show up there. And he was also working, incidentally, for Fox Sports, commentating on the rugby. This was sort of well before. He'd been doing it since day dot, really. And so I was always in his ear. I was like, Marto, you got to get me there. You got to get me down to Fox Sports. And then in 2006, Fox Sports News started, so actual dedicated news channel. And I just finished my university degree as well. And so I was really putting the hammer on Marto. Get me down there, mate. Get me a phone call. Get me something. And there just happened to be an opening. I flew down to Sydney, did an interview for Fox Sports News, and I got a job working as the guy who put all the news on the ticker, writing on the news, all the ticker on the bottom of the screen that scrolled along. I got that job, and then just started working the way into a reporter role. Did that for a couple of years, and then a job came up a couple of years later to work. So Fox Sports News was sort of downstairs in the office that we worked in, and then the production floor was upstairs doing the rugby. And I got a job up there doing the rugby in 2010, I think it was. And then I sort of started working on the rugby shows, and I literally have just taken those little opportunities that have presented themselves when they have, and sort of now working, still doing production for 10 years later. Still doing production work on the rugby here in Australia, on Super Rugby and test matches, and now also privileged to be able to call a few as well.
Can we just go back to that ticker role? That's a massive responsibility. I'm just wondering if you ever had any Ron Burgundy-esque slip-ups in your time.
Oh, mate, there's been a few. Like, I used to, spelling mistakes on that ticker can really they can really go bad. Look, there's been some seriously bad slip-ups. I've also, in that meantime as well, one that comes to mind, I've managed to get into the club rugby scene in Sydney, which is quite a big competition, the Shoot Shield, and they we always used to be on the ABC, which is the public broadcaster here, and they were for 60 years. And then back in a few years ago now, probably 5 or 6 years ago now, they went to Channel 7, and Channel 7 needed a commentary team, a host, and a host as well. And I'd been doing the club rugby just on a streaming platform, and that's sort of where I kind of got my start actually calling. And I'll never forget the day that the guy called me, the guy who was the producer, a guy named Simon Fordham, said, "We want you to host it, the Shoot Shield." And I was like, "Host it? What do you mean?" He was like, yeah, we want you to host it. You're the only guy who's ever worked in television out of all these guys. So we'll get you to host it, and then the rest of them will do it. The day that went to air, and he's like, "Oh, and you're going to go live too." I was like, "Live? I'm not going to pre-record the opener?" Nope, we're going to go live. And I remember the red light went on, and I was just like, I was a bumbling mess. It was one of the most horrifying experiences of my television career, particularly after it's such a historic competition. It had been on the ABC for 60 years, and people had, loved it, loved the coverage. And so we were breaking new ground by doing this. And then this bumbling idiot, bald idiot, stands on your television screens and can't string a sentence together. It was embarrassing. But since then, we've taken steps to make it better, and now it's such a popular product, the Shoot Shield here in Australia. It's arguably the most popular rugby product here in Australia. So, yeah, it took us a little while, but we got there, and yeah, there was some seriously bad broadcasting moments in those early days, that's for sure.
Well, you always have to go backwards before you go forwards, and there's always humility in that. Who are some broadcasters you looked up to in the commentary world, obviously outside of the legendary Dallen Stanford?
Yeah, well, the Quaggaburger himself. Loved doing some stuff with Dallen last year. We'll probably get to that shortly. But back in the early days, one commentator who was known as the voice of rugby in Australia, a guy named Gordon Bray. His voice is synonymous with that golden era of Australian rugby, sort of in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that was when I was just getting into rugby. So he's a guy that I always listened to. He had just such a way with words, such a way of describing people. I think he, famously described a player from New Zealand as the Taranaki pig farmer, in commentary, and that sort of stuck with people. But then, since then, I've worked with some of the greatest. Greg Clark is the lead play-by-play commentator on Fox Sports. He is just one of the great blokes as well you'll ever meet. He's certainly been a mentor for me, someone who's shown me how to be a professional broadcaster. And then one guy who Dallen knows pretty well as well, who is one of my best mates in the world, but is someone who I just look up to, and I reckon he's one of the best commentators in world rugby, and that's Sean Maloney. Just a great guy. Clarkie's so professional, and he's the consummate pro. Shawnee's probably just the consummate entertainer, and so you've kind of got. Not saying that Clarkie isn't entertaining and that Shawnee's not a pro, but you've got those two ends of the spectrum, and they're guys that have just influenced me over the years. And also, I'll digress a little bit, but back in the day, growing up watching cricket in Australia on Australian television, Richie Beno, that Channel 9 commentary team that they had, it's probably not something that the US audience is familiar with, but there was just this commentary team that did the cricket back in the day they just had this wonderful dynamic, and that sort of influenced me to be able to create a bit of an atmosphere with your co-commentators as well. There's a famous comedian down here in Australia who did a parody of those guys. It's called The 12th Man. I implore people to listen to The 12th Man. I don't know, Dallen, if you ever listened to The 12th Man.
Are you kidding me? Like, we would copy The 12th Man as growing up as youngsters. We could do like all the voices, and it was just unbelievable. I can't believe that one guy, it's Billy Birmingham, right? One guy did it all.
Yeah, Billy Birmingham.
Yeah. Legend.
And so I worked with Billy at Triple M when I moved to Sydney, and I was doing some part-time work with Triple M while I was working at Fox. And Billy was one of the panelists on this show that I worked on. And it was just like I just spent the whole time worshipping the ground that he worked on, because he was such a great comedian. And so yeah, that entertainment side of things, I think, has been a real big influence for me, because we're not landing planes. We're calling rugby. We're trying to entertain people, and that's what it is at the end of the day.
I couldn't imagine you and Maloney in the same room. That I just sit back and enjoy, especially if you guys had a couple cold ones on the go.
Oh, I've sat next to Sean for 10 years working at Fox, and our desk is it's an absolute mess. It was an absolute mess before he parted ways, but yeah, we had some fun times. We did a documentary together back in 2014 called Call of the Wallaby, which was a bit of a call to arms for Wallabies fans to get back behind the national team, and that's probably one of my greatest memories of working at Fox Sports doing that. It was such a fun time, and you can watch that on YouTube if you ever get a chance. It's just silly, but it's really fun. And working with Shawnee is just he's a larger than life character, one of the great humans.
Can you list some of the competitions that you've covered with Fox Sports over the years?
Yeah, I've done so. Super Rugby is probably the main bread and butter that I've covered with that. NRC, which is the National Rugby Championship, which is sort of the rung below. It's a bit of a competition that gets played at the back end of the year. That's where I cut my teeth really commentating. They saw it as a bit of a development competition for not only for the players and the coaches, but also for the broadcasters. So that was where I was really lucky enough to get a lot of play-by-play time under my belt. And then I've since done Super Rugby. I've done a couple of test matches, men's and women's, which is a huge privilege. That's the dream. To call a Wallabies test match is my absolute dream. I've done some Wallaroos test matches, which is the women's Australian team, and that's been fantastic as well. Shoot Shield as well. I've done the World Series Sevens down here in Sydney, that was a real privilege as well. Got to call an Australian game for that, and men's and women's. I did the under-20s World Championships last year with yourself, Dallen, as well. And then I've also covered, doing back reporting days, all sorts of events. Golf, big golf fan. Covered the Australian Open. Interviewed Greg Norman, Adam Scott, those sorts of guys. I've done a lot of production for SuperCars as well, for the motorsport. Done production for lots of different sports. But rugby's still my favourite to be. There's nothing like being at the ground when anthems are playing. The World Cup, 2015 World Cup, being there for the World Cup final and working on the production side of things for that, but singing the anthem and standing sideline, it gives me goosebumps thinking about it right now. It's one of the great moments of my career, was being there and singing the national anthem when the Wallabies ran out. The pity about the result, I guess. But I've been so privileged to cover so many great rugby events, and long may it continue. Hope so. I hope it continues.
Well, we hope so too, Swain. Now, let's talk about that Argentine trip we had. It was absolutely epic. But tell the audience listening, what's it like being a broadcaster? Because I know what it's like competing, right? You get there, you got to train all week, you got to prepare, you got to eat right, you do the game, and you leave, and that sort of thing. But give us the rundown. You're there for 3 weeks in Argentina. What does your daily schedule look like and things like that?
Yeah, well, it was certainly a wonderful trip, and such a great experience working with some wonderful people. In terms of preparation, I feel like I was really well prepared during that tournament. There was a lot of information coming in, so I think working on those events, the key is to just know everything inside out. Know the players that you're calling. Know the referees, know where they've come from, know your co-commentators, you just got to be the encyclopedia of knowledge that whole time. And so I spent a lot of that time, in the days leading up to match days, preparing and writing up my team lists and things like that, as did you, I'm sure, Dallen, but also being in a city like Rosario where there's a big event happening, you have to make sure that you enjoy yourself as well. And so get around, see the sights. It's one of the great privileges being on tour, being on a rugby tour in particular. And so you got to make sure you enjoy it and soak it up. And I feel like we did that pretty well, Quagga.
We certainly did. And I want to touch on this part because I thought it was epic. We had Sean Holly on as well, the holster. And you guys formed a band that would go on across the road from the hotel. There was this cool little bar, and you guys formed a band there. I think it was called the Jekyll and Hyde, and wasn't that an appropriate name?
Oh, it really was. Jekyll and Hyde. That place was fantastic. It was this kind of it was a little like sessions bar, I guess, wasn't it? People could kind of get up and play their guitar if they wanted to. Mostly it was the young lady who was kind of the manager of the joint. She'd be getting up there and singing. And look, I don't have a great voice, but she didn't really have a great voice either. And so we'd sit there and listen to this, drinking a cold one or whatever, maybe a Malbec or maybe a Fernet or maybe something else. But it was, we'd be sitting there and then we'd be like, after a little bit of Dutch courage, Sean was like, "Get up there, Swaino." And I'd be like, "Okay." And so we'd get up and we'd sing a couple of songs, and it became a little bit of a tradition, didn't it? To, a couple of days out from the match day, let's go have a drink and a meal and go and have a sing song as well. And Sean Holly, what an entertainer that bloke is. Like, he is
unbelievable.
He can sing, he can play guitar, he's a wonderful rugby analyst. The bloke's got it all.
He can auction things off. He did a live auction for us. Just picked up a trophy he had in his while he was on the podcast with us, and it was unbelievable. I mean, the guy had many talents, but I will say you two together was just a perfect team as well. Even on the games, of course, you guys had the chemistry to go with it.
Yeah, and look, we were privileged enough to do the final as well. Australia made the final, so I think that had a bit to do with it. But we were privileged to do the final, and we did strike up a bit of a combination after doing a few games, and yeah, it was such a great experience. But equally off the field, like equally just being around the hotel, hanging out with yourself, with Carl Tanana, KT, one of the great guys. I think he was on this podcast as well. I think he's been on this show, so I did have a listen to that. Great guy. Willie Losay, big win. There was just some real characters, and everyone had their, little quirks, but it was, I thought we were a great team, and it was a great couple of weeks there in Argentina. I wish we could have stayed longer.
100%. I also, obviously things shut down. Was really looking forward to, if we got the call up for this, under 20 championship in Italy this year, because again, food and the drinks will go down pretty well,
Oh, mate, imagine the food and drink there, the wine and the pizza and pasta. You guys were pretty good at training. That was one thing that I wasn't very good at in the days between match days. I was better off. I'd just go for a walk or whatever. You blokes were training the house down. I've never seen such fit human beings.
Well, we don't call you the water buffalo for nothing, just to... Now, listen.
Mate, absolutely.
I want to go back to, you spoke about being on TV live and doing that. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and there's some things that do go wrong, in the production, some here in North America, we've had some real botch ups and some funny ones you can laugh about now. Are there any other kind of like behind the scenes mess ups, or even ones that the audience may not have known, like you've had to call the highlights, but the screen was black and you couldn't see anything? Anything that comes to mind from a production point of view there?
Well, mate, like all those things have gone wrong when I've been calling. I've been caught with hot mics as well, and lucky. That's the worst thing, I reckon. When you feel like you're talking to someone privately and the whole world can hear, and you can really get caught out there, and I know I haven't, thankfully I haven't said anything bad about anyone or whatever. It's just not in my nature, but that's the sort of stuff that has gone wrong for me. That one that I described earlier, where the light went on and I melted down and became a puddle of water on a footy field. That's the one moment in my career that I just look back and when you feel this big, that's the moment. But yeah, look, black screens. I remember calling a game once from the sideline in just sideways rain. And it didn't bother me at the time, but I sounded like I was actually in a pool of water as well when I was calling that from the sideline. That sort of stuff. All those things have gone wrong, but the beauty of live television is that it just keeps going. So you just got to keep going, and all those little things that go wrong over the course of the time, you become a better broadcaster because of that. And yeah, I feel like all those things have made me a better broadcaster, a better human being as well.
Just rolling with the punches. You're a lead commentator doing the play-by-play live action. How would you describe your commentary style?
Yeah, look, I feel like actually I've tried to make myself, because I've got Clarkey, who's very professional, so well researched, and then you've got Sean, who's the consummate entertainer. And I've tried to find a little spot in the middle of those two guys. So I feel like, I've got the excitement level of Sean Maloney and the research of Greg Clark. Not that those two guys, it's a very blurred line, but I've sort of tried to position myself a little bit in the middle of those guys. So, look, I do love to have fun with it, and listening to Dallen and your one-liners, mate, like they're iconic. And I'd love to have more of those if I could, but just coming up with them on the spot, it just doesn't come to me sometimes. But, I like to make sure that the audience are well-informed, they're well informed, and they've got all the correct information coming at them. But also, as I said before, we're not landing planes. It's not NASA. We're trying to entertain, and we're trying to talk about rugby. So that's where I would sit myself. I'd try to be a bit entertaining as well.
Love it. And just in regards to educating the audience, we obviously, the Rugby Hive, we've got a global rugby audience. Can you explain the rugby popularity Australia compared to other sports across the country?
Yeah, rugby it's a popular sport still. It's had its real dramas down here. I'm not going to lie about that. But we're in a really crowded winter sports market down here. We've got Australian rules football, which is probably the most popular sport in Australia, most popular football code. They regularly get 90,000 to the MCG, the Melbourne Cricket Ground, on a Friday night for a round 6 match, And then you've got the NRL, which is a hugely popular television sport. And, they still get decent crowds as well for the big games, but their crowds aren't huge. And then you've got football, which is on pretty well the same time, so soccer. And then you've got rugby. And rugby has probably lagged behind those other codes, particularly AFL and NRL, for quite a few years. So it's a real challenge at the moment to capture the imagination and be able to get some cut through in the market. Getting pages on the daily newspapers is difficult when you've got 9 pages of NRL in Sydney or 10 pages of AFL in Melbourne before you get to another sport. So, yeah, it's certainly got its challenges, but there's been a real resurgence of grassroots rugby, club rugby. So the Shoot Shield that I was speaking about before, when it went to Channel 7 and when we started calling on it, I'm not going to say that we're responsible for it, but it started to just have a bit of a spike in interest. And I think people, instead of going to a Waratahs game in an empty stadium, which seats 40,000 people and there's only 10,000 people there, people would rather, and it costs $30 to get in and $10 for a beer. People would rather go to their local ground at 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon. They pay $10 to get in. There's no line up for a beer. Their kids can come along for free, can run on the field at halftime, can kick the ball around. I think that engagement at a community level is where rugby is still so popular, and I think it's a real opportunity for rugby as well. We saw a couple of Waratahs games go back to smaller fields because their home ground's being knocked down and rebuilt at the moment, and actually really got a good following. Like they got some good crowds there, and I think people are just more community minded down here when it comes to rugby union. And so going to a club game is such a more appealing prospect at the moment. So I think that's where the sport's at, and they really need to focus on that and harness it and start building on that. It's been a sort of an inverted pyramid. You've got the Wallabies up the top and everything, all the success of the Wallabies trickles down. I think they need to build that base now and build up to the Wallabies. I think that's where the sport's at the moment, a real crossroads.
Yeah, you make some good points as well. We've seen in Super Rugby that some of the crowds all over, you're not just in Australia, but all over, smaller tenor games in these huge stadiums, which is tricky. So what do you think the future holds for rugby in Australia, particularly now it being a pretty difficult time financially as well?
Yeah, it's at a really tricky moment in time, rugby at the moment. You know, they're still negotiating a broadcast deal for next year. As it stands, professional rugby in Australia, I'm not going to say it may not exist because it'll always exist, but next year there is no broadcast deal. That's where all the money comes from. So they're going to have to start thinking differently. I think the big teams, the Rugby Australia, how they supplement that income if a big broadcast deal doesn't come along. I think if one thing the coronavirus has done is it's shut everything down. And it's made everyone sit and think about how we can come out of this stronger. So that might be a little silver lining for rugby in Australia at the moment. They've rolled a lot of their board members have changed at a very high level. Got a new CEO at Rugby Australia, a new chairman who comes from a broadcasting and marketing background, has worked for News Corp. So I think that's a really positive thing. They just need to work on how they engage a captive audience again. I think that's the biggest challenge for rugby here in such a crowded sports marketplace.
Let's talk about one of the star programs out of Australia, the Women's Seven-Side. Olympic champions in 2016, of course, a remarkable achievement with New Zealand's dominance in the game. What do you attribute that success and do you think it's propelled the next generation of young female players?
Yeah, women's rugby is a real strong point here in Australia, and largely due to the success of that 2016 Rio Olympic gold medal for the women's sevens side. That was a brilliant team. Coached brilliantly by Tim Walsh, who's a wonderful rugby coach. He's now in charge of the men's team, and he did a really good job at identifying talent outside of rugby. So a lot of those players, a lot of those gold medalists didn't have a rugby background before they came into the program. Women like Emily Cherry, who came from touch football, Charlotte Caslick came from touch football, Chloe Dalton was a basketballer, and he managed to identify these women at an early time and bring them into a rugby program. They basically targeted that tournament, that Olympic gold medal. What that success has done as well is it's completely inspired a new generation of women. As you said, the Super W is now a very popular competition down here. It's basically mirrors the men's competition, the men's Australian teams. It's 15, so it's not sevens, but it's started to improve every year. It's probably been around for 4 years now, and it's improved every year. And there's a lot of young girls. I'm talking, 18, 19. We saw a 16-year-old girl play for WA a couple of years ago and scored 6 tries on debut. There is a real opportunity, and Rugby Australia recognise that. There's a real opportunity to engage women's rugby and bring it up to a level where it's on par with men's rugby. And I think they're really trying to do that. I don't know about you guys, but where there's a lot of girls, a lot of guys tend to gravitate there as well. So I think that's part of the marketing campaign of Rugby Australia. Let's get the girls involved and the guys will go too. And so, yeah, I think, but it's largely down to the success of that women's sevens team. Gee, they were inspirational at the time. I remember shedding a tear when they won that gold medal. It was awesome. And, they've all become really wonderful ambassadors for the sport post 2016.
I got a question for you. Where does Australia, both men and women, produce all these fast athletes? Because I remember when Dallen and I were on the World Series, Australia at that time, I think their core was maybe 3-4 guys, and they'd bring in a whole new batch from tournament to tournament, not even like two-stop to two-stop. And every single time, the guys would get off the plane in their yellow jumpers, and they would run circles around us. Yet we didn't have one guy that was fast. So what's in the water down under?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I think our upbringing just from being outdoors all the time as kids here in Australia. We've got very much a culture of, you got to get out of the house. The weather's perfect all the time. It's beautiful all the time. It never gets too cold down here, so you're always outdoors. You're always playing some sort of sport. Athletics is a big focus at all of our schools, and everyone loves just to run, and so I feel like that's a big part of it. There's a real focus on getting kids outdoors. When you're outdoors, what do? You run. So there is some serious gas down here. We've got a good history of Olympic sprinters and athletes at track and field. Australia's got a rich history of track and field. Athletes doing very well. So I feel like that's a part of it. And we've got one guy who is a former sprinter playing for the Australian Sevens team at the moment, Trey Williams, Quadzilla, they call him. He's arguably the fastest guy in world rugby.
Yes, arguably, but he definitely has the biggest quads. I mean, the camera work is brilliant. Going onto I don't know how he gets the shorts on, is amazing.
Mate, he must get someone to stitch them on afterwards, because they are huge, those quads. I'd love to see a showdown between him and Carlin, and I know that Carlin would love to do that as well, I'm sure.
I watched Carlin was Instagram live today while I was having breakfast, and he was talking to some global sprinter coach, and he told this lady, he referred to himself as he said he's faster than Jesus. He could beat Jesus in a race. That's
Did he say that?
Yeah, then he started to laugh, and the lady said, "Well, you can't actually say that." And he goes, "Yeah, sorry, but actually I would beat him."
Oh, brilliant. See, that's you know what? I love that. I love seeing his personality. I love seeing someone who backs themselves. And
I did not love picking my Cheerios off my computer though.
Did it startle you a bit?
Yeah, it was pretty. Did he just say that and then he repeated himself? Just going back to what you said about a lot of the athletes in that gold medal women's team, those crossover athletes, and for us with Canada, if you look at a lot of the women, we had a bronze in 2016 with our women. A lot of those girls are crossover athletes, and definitely more. My role with Rugby Canada, or one of my roles right now, is doing talent ID for our Olympic program. So I spent a good part of the winter flying in and out of these god awful. I shouldn't say god awful. It was god awful time of year to fly into some of these places across Canada. On the West Coast, it's pretty mild on the ocean, but we got some -40, -30, and a lot of our diamonds are in the rough. Small town hockey players, basketball players, football players, but the majority of our top athletes are in hockey. So we're starting to slowly engage those athletes at a greater level, and then one of the banks in Canada, RBC, they partner with Olympic Canada, and so they fly all the NSOs, national sport organizations, to these Olympic testing events. And so you have the rowing coach, the ski coach, the hockey coach, the rugby coach, all these different coaches, and we basically just fight over the athletes, or an opportunity for us to test and approach the ones that we feel would be good athletes. But the interesting thing about it is they miss that rugby culture. Like, I was loving your stories about your time sitting on the hill, having a pint, singing a song, the touring sides coming over when you're developing. That's just one piece though that I was thankful, and all, we're all around the same age. We had all those experiences, and then of course got to experience the international lifestyle as well. But just hope we don't lose that rugby culture.
That's a really good point you make, Robin, as well, because I think that is one of the biggest selling points for rugby. It's that off-field culture, and I feel like that professionalism has diluted that a little bit, and particularly here in Australia. And you've got guys at the moment fighting over contracts and pay disputes and stuff like that. Like, that's not who we are. It's not rugby in Australia, and so it doesn't sit well with the rugby loving public who are around our age, and I'm with you. I hope that we don't lose that culture with a lot of crossover athletes. I feel like that there's a big responsibility on the coaches and the mentors in those professional sides to keep that going. There are some wonderful characters. I mean, Stephen Hoyles, for example, is one of the assistant coaches of the men's sevens team at the moment. He's one of their great characters. I've been lucky enough to call a lot with Hoylesy, and he's one of the great characters. And I know that he would never let that culture element slip in the sevens team. And I've heard some stories about that as well. It's great, but I feel like that there's a big responsibility on the coaches, the mentors, the way an organisation is put together to instill that in the culture of these organisations, because professionalism hasn't been kind to rugby culture, I don't think.
Yeah, you're spot on with that. You need the custodians to kind of keep that going forward. Last couple of questions for you, my friend. Let's talk about the Sydney Sevens. Were you at that event this year? You were calling it, right?
No, I was actually.
Were you in the crowd calling it? I heard you somewhere.
I did last year. So I did
Yes.
2019. I did the Sydney Sevens, which was just, it was a wonderful event. Very exciting to be a part of. It was a big highlight in my career, being able to call on the World Series. And this year, though, it happened to coincide with the first round of Super Rugby. So I was actually in Japan calling the Sunwolves v Rebels when the Sydney Sevens was on. But last year it was in Homebush, which is like the Olympic precinct where they had the Sydney Olympics back in 2000. That was fantastic. It was a great atmosphere. We've got a lot of Fijian fans in Sydney's West. There's a lot of Fijian fans everywhere, let's face it. But there was a particularly big group of Fijian fans at Homebush last year, and then they were again there this year at the new Bankwest Stadium, which is where they played the tournament this year, purpose built for football, for NRL and rugby and for soccer. This stadium was brilliant stadium, and so yeah, great atmosphere. It's a great event. They've really built it up. I don't know. I feel like the last couple of years I reckon next year it wouldn't be a bad thing if they moved it away from Sydney. I feel like if you keep it fresh, you keep it maybe go to Brisbane, maybe go to Suncorp Stadium next year, and just keep it fresh, keep the vibes and the crowds coming. I feel like sometimes they outstay their welcome a little bit in some towns. People get a bit used to it being there. The first year it was in Sydney, all time, like one of the great tournaments, and Australia actually won a couple of years ago when it was still at Allianz Stadium as well, men's and women's tournament. I think that was 2018, maybe 2017, 2018. But brilliant! Sevens is such a fun carnival atmosphere, and I hope that they can keep that vibe. That's one place where that fun element of off-field rugby culture is still alive and well. Is in sevens, that's for sure.
So just going back to 2018 when the men and women both won, and I got two experts on the line here. What record did the women break? Did they not allow a try? It was something crazy about. Obviously they went undefeated, but their defense. There was an expert view about it after, but I feel like they didn't allow a try, or was a record amount of not.
Yes, they didn't. They didn't concede any points the whole tournament.
They didn't concede a point the whole tournament.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable.
Mic drop. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. It was just one of the most remarkable performances you'd seen from a sevens team, and they were right up there at that point. They'd won the gold medal, and then there was a little bit of a dip, a bit of a post gold medal dip in performance, and then because it's in January as well, it's hot start of the year. They really worked hard to get, and targeted that tournament to really peak, and wonderful performance, unreal couple of days that one. The party afterwards was all time.
I bet it was. There's one thing you guys know how to do, it's party that side. So let's finish off with the men's seven, the Aussie men's seven side. They've had some brilliant tournament wins over the years. Some great players come through. I remember being rounded like a park car by James O'Connor. He scored 3 tries. Yeah, honestly, first game, he was 17 years old. 17. He rounded us like park cars, scored 3 tries in that game. And everyone was like, who is this guy? He became, obviously, the great James O'Connor. The Honey Badger played against him, and he was chirping us as he was going. So there's been some good characters. But tell us a bit about the men's game. Is sevens very popular for them, that side? When do you think a series title could be on the line for the green and gold?
Yeah, look, I think 15s has always just been more popular here in Australia. Sevens has always been more. They've always treated it more as a development pathway rather than an actual destination. And I feel like that's changed since the Olympics have come in. It's now been a destination for players. It's been a place where they can go and make a career of rugby. I always feel like the Australian team have just been one or two players short of a really good squad. They've got 5 guys on the field who are awesome, and they've got 2 guys on the field who, aren't at the level that they need to be that competitive team. Having said that, I feel like the last couple of years they've been there or thereabouts. They've really been close to cracking it and just haven't. And I feel like even now, I just feel like they were so close to cracking being a really good squad in the last 6 months. Tim Walsh had started to just get a bit of momentum. Hoylesy's doing a really good job as an assistant coach. They had to really cast the net really wide. They had a lot of contracted players, and they were just sort of cherry picking, trying to find their best combination. And I feel like they were really close to it, and then coronavirus hit, and that's kind of stopped all that momentum. But yeah, I feel like Australian sevens, men's sevens, they've just been short of 1 or 2 world-class players when they've needed to have them. I don't know if you guys would agree. You've obviously seen a lot of it as well, and seen a lot of them on the World Series. They've got all this potential, and they also really struggle on day 2. I feel like they that first game of day 2, which everyone does, it's the hardest game to play in a sevens game, but Australia in particular have just always tripped up at that moment. It's not a rule; it's an exception, but it certainly has been the case for the Aussie team. I don't know if you guys would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely, Swain. You're spot on with that. And that's why the series has eluded them. They can win one of tournaments, but again, to keep that consistency over 8 to 10 tournaments is extremely difficult, and that's why only a handful of sides have been able to do that. But listen, my man, I know you're about to blow up there. You're inside your car. This is our very first podcast carpool one going here from Australia. So we'll send you some air conditioning package in the mail. So it's been an absolute pleasure getting your expert view, and really such a joy to have you on the Rugby Hive.
Oh, fellas, thank you so much for having me. And look, I appreciate you having me on and chatting. And it's great to hear your blokes' insights as well. Keep it up. We love it down here in Oz. And yeah, I'm going to turn up some Guns N' Roses or something in the car and go for a spin. Absolutely. Hey man, I love the content that's coming out of the Stanford household. Your wife's hilarious.
She is. Funny. And she can drink. She can really hold her own. I'll tell you what.
They need their own reality show. I'm into it. I'm subscribed.
Absolutely. I'd be right up for that. Chuck it on Netflix. Let's do it.
There we go. Loving it. Pal, listen, be safe that side. Enjoy your family. And again, thank you so much for your time, my buddy.
Yeah, boys. Thanks so much for having me. I'll chat to you soon. Really nice meeting you, Robin.
You too. Best wishes. Take care.
All the best, guys.
Also never stops talking, does Perenara, but I suppose that's the job of a scrum half.
Set!
He feeds. 5 out from their own line. Sotutu picks up, finds Jordan. Skins one. Back to Hoskin Sotutu. Here comes Perenara. Back of the inside. Barrett! Oh, not even Wes Craven could have directed that. It's frightening from the All Blacks. And Beauden Barrett gets a popular try in DC.
Thank you for listening, you sleek sensations.
If you haven't already, please subscribe to Rugby Hive Podcast and catch us on all the socials at Rugby Hive.
We appreciate your support. Be safe out there, and we'll see you soon.